what is going on with the Northern Lights? Is there more to them than we are led to believe? Or maybe that we just don't know? Because I got another email from someone who experienced something crazy while looking at the Northern Lights. And the thing about this one is that this came from a person who has way more followers than me on social media, but her channel is all based in this one interest or hobby. And she did not want me using her real name. She did not want me using her location because she was like, people will find me out. I promise you I'm not a crazy person. I'm highly educated and I just don't want anything weird attached to my channel. And I was like, I totally get that. So I'm going to tell her story. So she often chases the Northern Lights. She lives in an area where they can be seen very often. It's just like a hobby. That's not on her page at all. That's just like something she does in her free time. Also, she wanted to clarify though that she does not drink alcohol. She does not take anything. She's a published author. She has a background in medicine. She's never had a brain injury that would lead her to experience what she experienced. But because her and her husband do this as a hobby, they storm chase often. They know how to track them. They have pretty good visibility. They have some favorite spots to see them. On the night of March 23rd, 2023, she travels to one of these favorite spots. Her husband is not with her. She said she usually doesn't like to go alone, but on this night, the numbers were reading too high that she couldn't miss it. She knew it was going to be a great show, but she feels like she got more than she bargained for. I don't know exactly what number she's referencing, but I assume it's something to do with tracking the visibility. As she's driving near the shoreline to her favorite spot, she pulls over because she can see the Northern Lights start to crest on the horizon. She decides to pull her car on the side of the road instead of driving to the sandy area where she normally parks. To the right of her is the woods, to the left of her is the road, and then this lake. She said the auroras can appear and disappear very quickly, so she wanted to make sure she could see it. She said there's no other cars around. It's not uncommon. They don't live in a super populated area. She parks her car, she gets out, she decides to walk about 100 yards down the road, take some better pictures because when the lights reflect off the surface of the water, it makes for really, really cool pictures. She gets down to this sandy area, not quite the beach, but she hears this low humming. It sounded electrical. It was like a transformer or a street light, but it's pitch black. There's no street lights around where she's at. She notices that the lights are showing more above her head than they are on the shoreline, like directly above her head. The humming is getting louder, and she said she looked directly up and she saw the lights doing something that they had never done before, which was swirling in a circle around what she could only describe as like a black hole. She said to describe it simply, it looked like green lights above her head swirling into a vacuum, and she was like, jackpot, and she started taking pictures. And then came the sounds, and she says this next part of the story happened very, very quickly over the span of like 1 or 2 minutes. She started hearing sounds from the woods, and at first she couldn't identify them, but then she realized it was chanting, maybe 15 or 20 people that was getting louder and louder. She could hear it over the water crashing on the shoreline, so she turns to face the woods, and it was not like a conversation, like a back and forth. It was rhythmic, and it sounded like if you heard like sounds from a house party in the woods where like it starts off low and it gets louder and louder as you come up to the party. That's what it sounded like, but it was chanting. It was regular. It was following a rhythm. This struck her as very, very strange because, again, they're not in a populated area, and she said there were no houses or people for about 15 or 20 miles from where she was at. She was very confused, but she was like, I want to be clear that it was coming from one spot. It was not circling around me. And then came the sound of the geese. She said she knows it was geese. It was honking, squawking. She expected a flock of geese to fly out of the woods above her, but she saw nothing. The last thing she remembers is the sound of coyotes and wolves at the same time, howling in the distance from the woods. And she said she knows it was both at the same time because they have both where she lives and she encounters them regularly. She said even though she's familiar with both of their sounds, she has never been in a place where she has heard both of them howling and yelling at each other at the same time in the same place. And these sounds were coming from the same place as the geese and the chanting. And she said at first she thought they were fighting each other, but then she realized that it was howling and yapping. It was communication. It wasn't fighting. She said the last thing she remembers is putting her hand on her hip for protection because, yes, she carries because it's legal where she lives and she just doesn't go out in the woods alone without protection at night. So she's got her hand on her hip. She's listening to these sounds. She's trying to make sense of what is going on. And then all of a sudden, everything stops. It goes completely silent. She can't see anything. Everything goes black. She said it was like she was in a deprivation chamber. She blinks her eyes a couple times and looks up to see the lights, and suddenly she's back in her car. She can't see the lights because she's staring at the interior of the roof of her car. The spot where she was standing is about 100 yards away. She feels a coldness on the side of her cheek, so she instinctively pulls her glove off and touches it, and she realizes it's wet. She has like a tear or two. She's like, have I been crying? She said she was absolutely stunned and bewildered. She has no recollection of walking back to her car. She said she wasn't fearful. She was just completely shocked. She said 1 second she was on the road trying to identify the noise, and the next she was in her car. She described it as the feeling when you wake up in a hotel room and you don't know where you are. It was the same thing. She felt displaced against her own free will. She said she wishes she had looked at the clock, but she has no idea how much time had elapsed. Her instinct said, get out of here and fast, so she just drove home. She said she still can't explain it. She has no idea what happened. She's been checked out. She's fine. She has chased the auroras since and has never had another strange experience, but she says she doesn't share this story often because she fears it'll land her in the nut house. And she said even though she wasn't afraid in the moment, she's fearful now thinking about what happened. They've been back to that same spot, nothing strange. But she's curious if anyone has a better explanation or if anyone's experienced something similar. Although she didn't want to be tagged, she will be reading the comments, although she won't be responding. But she ended her email by saying if she had to guess what happened, she thinks it had something to do with the convergence of maybe different dimensions, maybe our reality. But as she stood outside, she felt like she was witnessing something she wasn't supposed to be. And then it was like a rubber band snapped her back to the reality she was supposed to be in. She said she wished she had something else to say, but she feels just as lost now as she did when she experienced it. If you have any thoughts, let her know. And if you want to submit a spooky, scary story time, just hit the link in my bio.